Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're at and where you're listening from. This is Michael Cross here from Unlock the Door Radio, bringing you another exciting hour of thought-provoking discourse. And tonight, we are very honored to have John Whitehead, the head of the Rutherford Institute, joining us. And I thought it'd be really good to get his perspective on the police state that seems to be evolving in the United States. And since he just got a book published called A Government of Wolves, I think I would like to turn things over to John and let him tell us a little bit about this new book. Hey, John, how's it going?
Hey, fine. How you doing?
Very good. Okay, Government of Wolves. It sounds like I get that image of the sheep, the sheepskin over a wolf, and leading the pack away, or the herd, I should say.
Yeah, the title comes from Edward R. Murrow quote, the great CBS journalist of the 1952. Basically, really, truly, he borrowed from a quote from Thomas Jefferson, by the way. It really a takeoff on a Jefferson quote, but he said a nation of sheep begets a government of wolves. And the subtitle of my book is The Emerging American Police State. So I've been looking at this subject for probably I started writing in the 1980s on this subject. In fact, I was writing in the 1980s on the National Security Agency and some of the things they were doing then, which is very similar to what they're doing now, except that they have much more advanced computer systems than they did then. So I just looked at every aspect of society. Before I wrote the book, I went back and looked closely at some of the former regimes in history, such as the Nazi state. And was the number of commentators, by the way, have written on the fact that what we're seeing today mirrors what happened in Nazi Germany, and it seems to be coming true in the United States. So I also look at a number of science fiction films. One in particular, which probably would stick out to most of your listeners if they've seen it and know any of the trends, is Minority Report, a Steven Spielberg film starring Tom Cruise. All the technology in that movie is now available to government use. The movie is actually set in 2054, so we're about 40 years ahead of the curve. So looking at sci-fi movies, some of the things that have been predicted. Basically, what I conclude in the book is that we live in the future. We're in the future now. While most of us were asleep, we slipped into the future, and we're there. We are now living in a police state. When I use the word police, I'm not talking about local cops running around in local cities. I'm talking about federal agents. All the federal agents now in the United States, federal agencies have SWAT teams. They're fully militarized. The IRS, Department of Education even has a SWAT team in this country. They've been doing SWAT team raids on people for overdue loans. So when I use the word police, don't just think of some local policeman pulling somebody over for speeding. I'm talking about the entire police hierarchy, which, by the way, there are really no local police anymore. I can tell you about some cases that we've actually handled that prove that.
Well, you brought up Minority Report, and you say you deal with it in the book. In the 1980s, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the 1980s, the issue was how far could the government spy on people's telephone conversations and their on-paper mail. And most people at that time were very much into the idea that we should have privacy. But I'm wondering if people now, they live on the computer. On Facebook, people will share intimate details about themselves that in the past no one ever talked about. If you
on
send
their cell phones
pictures,
as well.
If you send pictures across your cell phone, those are intercepted. They're saved. And isn't it true that you could use psychometric profiling on any individual, and it wouldn't be that hard of a computer program now? And, advertisers use it. They try to figure out everything from your age, income, sexual orientation, all these kinds of things. The government system, I would think, would be much more powerful in predicting exactly what you're going to do at a certain time.
Yeah, it's crime prevention. It's pre-crime, very much Minority Report, by the way. to show you, maybe to illustrate it really dramatically, a case that we actually handled at the Rutherford Institute. And by the way, at the Rutherford Institute, we handle cases, civil liberties issues, when people are arrested by the police or they don't have a right to free speech, which is really coming under attack in the United States. We had a case about a year ago, a young Marine. He had served in Afghanistan, decorated Marine, and also in Iraq. He had a home business right outside of Richmond, Virginia. He had just finished jogging earlier in the morning. He was sitting at his typewriter, at his computer, typing at his home business. He didn't have a shirt on. He heard some noise outside. Again, it was August, and he went out and he peered outside. There were about 8 or 9 vehicles that pulled up around his property, black vehicles. Out from the vehicles jumped local police, people in plain clothes, men running toward his house. You know, again, he sees all these black-clad people. And this illustrates my point that there are really no local police anymore. So he steps out, he opens the door and says, "What's up?" He didn't, you know, he's never committed any crime or anything like that. When he opens the door, he said, "What's up?" And one of the police, along with one of the guys that identified himself as a Department of Homeland Security agent, an FBI agent, another agent, they said, "We're concerned about your Facebook posts." They had been reading his Facebook posts. They were anti-government posts, no doubt about that. He didn't like the way President Obama's issuing so many executive orders and bypassing Congress. He was playing a private Facebook game called Dear Illuminati. And I never played the game, but it was a private game that his sister, his brother, and just he played. That was it. They actually mentioned that. They asked him to step out, and he, you know, again, this guy knows his Constitution. This is free speech in America. They quickly grab him. They handcuff him behind his back. He asked to have a shirt, and they said no. They took him out in the front yard. This is 8 or 9 police. And one cop pushed him against a fence and lacerated his back and started bleeding. They took him to the police station. When he got to the police station, he asked for bandages. They said no. They stuck a prison shirt on him. The prison shirt stuck into the cut in his back. He said it really hurt. They didn't even take care of him. His mother panicked, called the Rutherford Institute. We called the police, and I asked the police chief what the guy had done. I said, "What has this guy done?" His name is Brandon Robb. He said, "Oh, he's committed no crime. We're just concerned that his Facebook posts are antisocial and he may have a psychological problem." So he had a 2-minute investigation in a jail cell. 2 minutes to the psychiatrist who ruled him basically he had mental problems, the psychiatrist said. And why the psychiatrist said it is because Brandon Robb had long pauses when he was asked a question. What I tell clients when they're arrested, by the way, is you don't even answer questions unless you have a lawyer present. So he was basically doing what he'd been taught by people such as myself. He was given a short hearing. He was actually put in a mental hospital for 10 days. We went to bat for him, got him out of court. A judge ruled he shouldn't have been in there in the first place. It was nuts to put him in there. And we've sued the federal government over this issue. But that sort of illustrates my point of what we're seeing happening in this country. We have now veterans across the country have said the same thing. When they post something on Facebook, the government's reading it. It's being passed on by Facebook to the government. They're reading everything you do. And veterans are getting FBI interviews because they're making anti-government Facebook posts. This is our First Amendment right to do so. So that's the state of affairs.
Yeah, I mean, most people assume that when they sit in front of their computer that they have privacy. I mean, you hear people like Obama talk about the right to privacy if it comes to such things as, I don't know, abortion or something like that. But he seems to have forgotten that the right to privacy also extends to our speech, it seems. I mean, is it true, too, that not only can people monitor your Facebook post and any other post you may put anywhere on the Internet, but they can also monitor what websites you visit. They make a record of that, as well as they can actually watch you on the camera that's on your computer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They're taking it was revealed, about 3 or 4 weeks ago that the NSA downloads about 200 million text messages a day in this country alone. So any text message that you send in this country, whether it's time to go protest in front of the building or whatever you're going to do, or it's about a movie. In fact, I'm telling people to be very careful what they text. I had a friend who had seen a movie, and I said, "How was it?" He texted me and said, "It was a bomb." And I I immediately texted him back and said, "Do not use that word. It puts you automatically in a file." In fact, I've had NSA agents, by the way, visit me. They say the computers in Utah are so powerful that they basically do the work. In other words, they will signal this person's a problem, that person's a problem. They give it to the agent, and the agent then becomes basically an extension of the computer, and they go out and do the investigation. We've had talk show hosts contact us because they are outspoken on the air about Obama or political figures. The FBI actually visits them to interview them for their free speech on the radio. So that's how bad it's gotten. It's very similar to what we saw in the 1950s and what Edward R. Murrow and some of the people fought in those days, where they were watching everything people were doing, except, again, technology now drives the show. Technology is so awesome now that anything you do, there's no such thing as privacy. The FBI admits now they can turn on your laptop. It's a camera from a distance. They can turn on your cell phone. It becomes a microphone. And with many cell phones now, they're going to have facial recognition software. I mean, you're going to be watched wherever you go. So it's very much what George Orwell said in his book, 1984. No matter what you do, where you're at, you have to assume you're being watched and listened to. And that's exactly the state of affairs in America. And this is not conspiracy theory, by the way. It's all notable. People ride on it, credible journalists. This is what's happened.
Yeah, I mean, I have kids, and I mean, it's to the point, I guess, that you actually have to tell your kids, if you're, let's say you're a teenager and you're alone in the house and you've taken a shower and it's a hot day, probably not a good idea maybe to sit in front of the computer without getting dressed, because there could be some person somewhere watching you.
Well, yeah, the hackers, I mean, you got weird people out there that snatch kids. That's happening across the country.
Yeah.
We've actually got cases that I know of where kids have gone on and done kind of weird dances and stuff, twerking they call it. And some strange people saw it. They email them, and I mean, you don't know who you're dealing with out there. I'm not sure that some of these people are private persons. I don't know. They may be government agents. I have no idea, because they're everywhere. So everything that Orwell wrote about, Philip K. Dick, by the way, I consider a prophet. People like that. Or Ray Bradbury. If you haven't read Fahrenheit 451, I tell people you're illiterate. If you haven't read Philip K. Dick's novels, these guys actually saw the future. And they thought they were living in the future. Orwell, by the way, thought his book was already happening when he wrote it. So we're way down the road, folks. I mean, what this conversation I'm having right now, it's downloaded. I mean, again, NSA agents tell me, they watch everything. These are people that don't like what the NSA is doing. And that, so you wake up to the reality. Again, the question is there anything we can do? The remedies are fairly slim. I mean, when someone has the powerful technology, and by the way, we only see one tip of the iceberg of what they have. And by the way, Google just bought their 8th robotics firm. All the big corporations are into robotics. Drones will start flying over America in 2015 with awesome capabilities such as scanning devices where they can see through the walls of your home, hack into your Wi-Fi. All that will be fed back to the NSA, FBI, CIA, which all work together.
What I think is really interesting is you brought up the thing about conspiracy theory. And it was just the other day, there was an article. It was in one of the big networks. I just saw a link to it on another site, and I went to it. And now they're actually coming out and saying that they're working, and they actually have prototypes of these like insect drones.
They have insect drones.
Huh?
They have a beetle drone, which actually can hide in the crevices of your house. They can record everything you're doing. They have the hummingbird drone. People can go, I tell people, go on YouTube and look at these things. You can go on to YouTube and see the hummingbird drone, the seagull drone. They have the new Atlas Android, which is a 6 foot, 330 pound human being, which is, I've been told, by the way, by drone professors, that's your future policeman. It's going to be somewhere after 2020, they'll be very sophisticated, knocking on your door if they have an issue. And by the way, a drone flying over your house, hovering over your house, watching what you're doing, if you're cleaning a legally owned shotgun, there's a chance you might get a SWAT team raid. We actually have cases where people have legally owned shotguns. The police find out they do SWAT team raids and people get shot. And there are about 70,000 of those occurring in America today. And that's one thing we want to talk about more maybe later is militarized police. I mean, you don't have policemen anymore in brown outfits. They're in black military outfits, provided, by the way, by the U.S. government, Department of Defense.
Well, the thing is, yeah, I mean, I'm really interested in things like transhumanism and things like that, so I keep up on the research. But what really did surprise me, though, was just this article in a main, one of the big networks that, of course, they were making it sound good. They were saying, oh, with these little tiny aerial drones, they'll be able to, maybe go into, fly into a cave or into a fire or something and rescue people. I mean, give information back. I mean, it was like a PR thing. It was a PR. But at the same time,
drones will have beneficial purposes, by the way. I mean, they will be used beneficially in some instances, sure. Yeah.
But at the same time, whereas something can be used beneficially, I mean, dynamite was invented by Nobel, to help in the mining and building infrastructure and things like that. And of course, it got used big time in World War I. So everything has a double edge to it.
Well, too, it's more than a double edge. If you study the way the police are going in this country, in small communities, police have MRAPs, which are large assault vehicles with turrets on the top. You're talking about communities of 5,000 people. They have all the military gear. It's all being provided basically free by the Department of Defense. In fact, those MRAPs, the turret vehicles I just talked about, they cost the American taxpayer $150,000. They're given by the Department of Defense, the Department of Homeland Security. They give them to local police for $2,000.
Wow, that's less than a high
school. So large corporations, and that's what's driving it. The large corporate state is driving.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's move on here a little bit.
It's not very friendly.
Yeah. I was talking to someone recently. She's a, educator. Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Okay. I was talking to an educator. I mean, she's about as conventional looking as you can get. I mean, not that she's bad looking. I mean, she doesn't stand out in any way, shape, or form. And she said that when she took a trip to Germany recently with her daughter, she was pointed out. I mean, it just said, well, ma'am, could you come here? And they conducted a full strip search on her, even though she had said, well, I don't want to leave my daughter alone. They said, well, tough. And is this a trend that's being fueled by the U.S. government so that it reaches throughout the world?
Oh, yeah. There's no doubt about that with the TSA. And again, the Rutherford Institute, we've had cases on that where they touch every part of your body. I mean, we defended female Air Force, and they fly actually for American, these American airline companies that they've complained to me they're touching their breasts, their vaginas. We've had people in wheelchairs who said, I just had an operation, please do not touch me. And they actually go in and injure them. I think, again, America is the leading empire of the world. And as it stretches its military empire out across the world, it's also retracting at the same time. It's come home to America, to the American soil. So everything you're seeing happening in the military, from the recent announcement that the American military is now going to go to robotics for their soldiers, you're going to see that come home. It's already, like I said, go on YouTube and watch the Atlas Android. That thing is going to be frightening. I've told people, can you imagine opening your door and there stands an android and you say, do you have a warrant under the Fourth Amendment? Are you really going to do that? Or listen to this. If you're a free speech protester, remember how brutally they put down the Occupy protesters in the fall of 2011 with billy clubs, tasers, pepper spray. when you see a fleet of Dragonfly drones coming down the street armed with sound cannons, rubber bullets, lasers and tasers, are you going to exercise your right to free speech? No, you're going to run. So the old days where people are out there really getting rowdy and asserting their rights, I think those are going to be gone. I mean, the robotics thing is going to be very, very dangerous to freedom.
Yeah,
in every way you can think about it.
Yeah, often the mainstream media demonizes other countries, but I can tell you right now, I've been to Russia a lot of times, and their airport security is not anything as, well, I guess you could say, intrusive as America's is. Even in China, I mean, you're supposed to rate the person checking your papers and stuff according to how polite they were to you. I mean, and it just seems that, now I just tell tourists that are going to America, from Europe or something, that they should be extremely careful. And the sad part is, it used to be that the police and so forth, except in maybe a really large city, were very trustworthy. But now, I interviewed Paul Craig Roberts the other day, and he was saying that sociopaths seem to be attracted to police work now.
Well, I have a whole chapter in my book, A Government of Wolves, on the fact that that's partially true. I mean, people with a certain mentality, but also once you put on all this military gear, you have assault vehicles, you have Kelwire helmets, again, all provided by the Department of Defense in America. And you get in a group and you start saluting. These are local police, by the way. You become the military, and there's no questioning anymore. Whereas in the old days, you might have one policeman show up with a warrant. Now you have a whole gang of them in these black outfits. And there are cases that I detail in my book, A Government of Wolves, where the case of Ayanna Jones a couple of years in Detroit, they did a SWAT team raid and all their military gear into her apartment. She's 10 years old. She's asleep on the couch in a prince's blanket. One of the policeman's rifles go off, kill her, blood splatters on the carpet. The father runs out screaming, "Why'd you kill my daughter?" They slam him face down in her blood. Come to find out, the guy they're looking for is up 2 or 3 floors. They were in the wrong apartment. So that the mentality changes. They become the military. In other words, in America, when a policeman looks at you, supposedly you're supposed to be the master and he's the servant because you pay his salary. That's changed. Now you look like an enemy combatant in many of these situations. And there's all kinds of cases where people are killed in these raids we're seeing in America, and those things are increasing. So the landscape here is very, very aggressive. I kind of know why Everett Snowden's hiding out in Russia. It's probably a much safer place, to put it that way.
Well, Zimbardo, with his Stanford study on prisons, showed that if you put someone in a certain type of position and clothing, they will adapt to that. I think, and people listening, I just think about this. Whenever you put on a costume for Halloween, you start playing the part. You dress up like a vampire, you start talking like Bela Lugosi. It just is part of our psychology.
Yeah, in my book, I have a whole section in the book called The Psychology of Compliance, where I talk about Zimbardo and also Stanley Milgram's experiments at Stanford, where he showed, people get out of control if, there's something in human nature. So that's why human nature needs to be restrained. But once you get in those military gear and get in the groups and get your assault rifles and you arrive in an assault vehicle at an American citizen's home, you're viewing that American citizen different. Under our Constitution, supposedly, like I said, we're supposed to be the masters. Even the President of the United States is supposed to be our servant. But those things have all been reversed. That's no longer true in America.
I just have a weird question popped in my mind. There's been a couple of these stories I've seen in the past where there's been like an exhibition thing for people to watch, government emergency teams and so forth. And a couple of them have had like a zombie theme, like something, Walking Dead or something like that. Is there something deeper in that? Is there like this conditioning people to feel that someday there'll be these out of control masses that have to be put down?
To be honest with you, and again, I don't want to sound conspiratorial here, and I'm not. I think that we're being conditioned to accept ultimate authority, especially the younger folks, through the use of technology. A lot of the films we see are the superhero films where people are getting their heads smashed. No one's following the law. People are going through doors. All the things I see happening today, I think that, and we're being taught to accept the fact that we are being watched. There's no privacy. I mean, people are giving it up willingly. But as I said, before I wrote my book, A Government of Wolves, I went back and looked at Nazi Germany. It was the same thing there. As early as 1933, and the media is part of this, by the way, the newspapers in Germany were running articles on the concentration camps. And most people just accepted it, saying, I'll never be in that. I'll never be in one of those places. About 5 years later, a lot of those folks that said that were in those camps. So that's exactly what's happened in this country. Except here, I mean, and again, I have a section of the book entitled The Electronic Concentration Camp. We're already in a concentration camp here. If you make the wrong move, and again, I get this question all the time when I speak. People will say, well, if I've done nothing wrong, what's the hassle? Well, you don't really have to do anything wrong. In Nazi Germany, husbands, because a wife might speak to a Jew on the street, he would report her and she'd be taken away. Martin Luther King did nothing wrong. The FBI collected 17,000 pages of information on the man to discredit him. And what did he want? Equality for all citizens. So, again, we're all, with the advance of technology, we're far beyond what happened to Martin Luther King in the 1960s. I mean, everything you do now is categorized, you're filed, you're watched. I've had NSA agents tell me that. In fact, here's the scary thing. This is just one of the scary things. I've had NSA agents tell me they're leaving the country. They're either leaving the country or going to high ground in states like Colorado, Arkansas. These are the things they're telling me. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But I do know that some of the rich people are actually buying up parts of South America and places like that.
Wow.
So, I mean, people feel something kind of, here's another thing that people really have to be aware of. In August of 2012, the Department of Homeland Security purchased 1.6 billion hollow point bullets for use by their agents and other federal agents. Again, I said all the federal agencies have SWAT teams. Hollow point bullets, which explode on contact. The Social Security Administration followed suit and bought about 200,000 rounds of hollow point bullets for use by their agents. So the question is, why would agents in the federal government be armed with hollow point bullets? They're not for target practice. They're for deadly kills. And that's got a lot of people on edge here. They're not wondering what in the world you're going to use hollow point. 1.6 billion hollow point bullets?
Yeah, I'd encourage people to do the math on that. I did. I don't have the figure in front of me, but it was sort of like you'd have to like have 10,000 agents firing a bullet once a second. And I calculated how many, was it days it would take for them to use that much up? You know, if you had that many agents, one round per second, it would still take a very long time to finish your bullets up.
But here's the thing. I had an interviewer say, well, they were just probably buying them up so that the crooks wouldn't get them, okay? But they didn't buy them up. They actually got a company called ATK Corporation. They contracted to have them made specially for them. So they weren't just buying them up.
Yeah, and I won't name the newspaper, but I remember when I first heard about that story, of course, whenever I hear about something, just on a blog or something, I check it out to see if it's legit. And I found a newspaper article in a very well-established mainstream, publication, and it was confirming exactly what you said about the 1.6 billion bullets. In fact, it was saying that this was going to be if you'd bought stock or something in some company, you'd have made a lot of money. But then later, I noticed that when I went back to that, a couple months later, the article had been pulled, even though it was a couple months later, it was starting to go mainstream, I guess, because of the alternative press. The government must be using a lot of pressure to make sure that some stories are just best, assigned to memory hole.
Well, the point is the American government is a secret surveillance spy state funded by large corporate interests. It has nothing in common with the average American. It's just like when President Obama gave his recent National Security Agency speech, where he said virtually nothing. And people came to me. I said, why would you believe the head of a secret surveillance spy state? What if he said anything? So James Madison, who was supposedly is called the father of our Constitution, he said we ought to mistrust all those in power. A good sense of skepticism is very, very important. Not that you hate or whatever, but we know from history that people in power routinely abuse power. They steal money. In the 70s, when Richard Nixon was using the IRS to attack his friends and collecting information on them. I mean, that was time to wake up. But virtually every president, Ronald Reagan, by the way, used the NSA against his enemies. Every president has used the NSA. And the NSA, by the way, has all the information they need, for example, all the leaders of our country. For example, if the President of the United States or any congressman have done anything that can be used against them, the NSA definitely knows about it. So I would go so far as to say that groups like the NSA, FBI, which the NSA uses the FBI to collect domestic information, by the way, really run the country.
So if you had it's not inconceivable then that when people say, well, I don't say or do anything that I feel is really noteworthy or anything like that, but then maybe that's when they're like 20, but then maybe when they're 40, they've decided to run for office, and there may have been some love notes they sent to somebody, who they were having an affair with or something like that, that they've sent over some email. And those are hidden away. And you're saying then that there could be a possibility that NSA could be used then to contact that person and say, hey, maybe you don't want to vote against us. I mean, J. Edgar Hoover did stuff like that.
Yeah, Hoover did a lot of bad things, by the way. But, there have been cases where judges in this country have been up for nomination for a judgeship, and actually what they purchased at leading bookstore chains, it's revealed the books they've read. Now, what in the world is that anybody's business? I actually had an NSA agent tell me, he said, and this is key to the privacy concept. He said, we're becoming like chickens in cages. And I had to think about that for a second. He said, have you ever been behind a truck full of chickens in those little small cages? And I said, yeah. He said, that's what we're becoming. That's what lack of privacy does. You're locked in that little cage. You're afraid to move, afraid to think. But here's the key. You don't really have to do anything wrong if the right political person's in power. And for example, with drones coming, and even private individuals, your neighbors are going to have drones, by the way. If you're out in the front yard and you're a political figure and you might kiss the next door neighbor's wife on the cheek to thank her for something, that's all it will take to blackmail you. They'll release the footage of that saying you had an affair. And, it may sound preposterous, but that's exactly what's happened in the past. And by the way, police departments around the country right now, and there's some cases actually on this, they're handing out apps for cell phones free where citizens can now anonymously report their neighbors for certain violations. And as I discuss in my book, in what I call the overcriminalization of America, it's against the law in most cities to have a chicken in your backyard now or have a vegetable garden. In San Rafael, California, it's against the law to smoke in your own home. So, neighbors can report you, they can arrive, and if you have the wrong political view or you're planning a protest, the FBI is already sweeping in, by the way, before protests now and ransacking apartments, trying to find things to discredit the protesters. So we don't live in the America that people read about in the textbooks at school.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to say this. You're going to get some people, probably not ones listening to this show, but there are going to be some people who are going to say, this doesn't sound like my community. And what would you say to that when they're like, well, you're describing something that seems to be some sort of dystopian fantasy that, is this part of an acclamation you see that's been going on for years? And it's like how does this compare like to Nazi Germany, for instance? In 1933, did everyone suddenly go, oops, there goes my freedom? You know?
No, they were too busy being entertained. The average American watches 160 hours of television a month. They have no idea what's going on in the local community. I talk to very few Americans that either ever go to a school board meeting or to a city council meeting. They have no idea what's going on. Local newspapers are terrible generally about reporting these things. You'll not get it from CNN. SWAT team raids. They're going through doors, shooting people's dogs, killing them. I have yet to find hardly any major media outlet that even discusses the fact that this is going on in America.
Yeah, I mean,
so most people don't know. It is in their communities, but they have no idea it's occurring. SWAT team raids are going on in every community in America virtually, but people do not realize that it's happened because they're not being reported.
Well, do you get SWAT team raids for something like, for instance, let's say a person misses, they send in a child support payment late or something like that? Has there been SWAT teams on something like that?
Yeah, as I document in my book, like I say, the Department of Education in this country, in America, has SWAT teams. They've been doing SWAT team raids for people with overdue loans. 75 to 80% of SWAT team raids are for mere warrant service, which usually one policeman would come to your door, okay, knock on your door, have the warrant. Well, this is key. This is why we have it. It's the key provision in our Constitution, by the way, our Fourth Amendment. It says, before the government can either do surveillance on you or touch you, violate your body integrity, they have to have probable cause, which means some evidence of illegality. And if they got that evidence, they need to go to a judge unless it's a super emergency situation to get a warrant. They are supposed to arrive at your door and say, are you John Smith? What's happening today is, like I said, with the case of Ayanna Jones, they were in the wrong apartment. There was a case of a Marine, which I detail in my book, named Jose Guerrero in Arizona. The police were doing SWAT team raids in the whole area looking for people who had pot in their home, marijuana. They entered his home at 3 a.m. in the morning. He's a former Marine. He took his family, shoved him in the closet. He stood at the end of the hallway with his hunting rifle. The police entered and fired over 70 times. 50 bullets hit him. He bled to death on his own floor. The police said he fired at them. An investigation showed that the safety never came off his weapon. No marijuana was found in his home. That's how things have changed, folks. If you've ever seen the movie, maybe in other countries you've seen the Andy Griffith Show where you have friendly cops who called you and talked to you, you don't get that anymore.
No, I mean, it seems that the focus, like I said, I mean, it's like a focus that you are, you're in an occupied zone. The police are given military drills. My wife and I were watching we spent a lot of time in Vegas when just after we were married. And so my wife has this thing about looking at shows that dealing with Vegas, and it showed something about police there, and it was like when they were lining up, it wasn't like those old movies where all the police just kind of file in and sit down and they hear their sergeant or whatever tell them what's going on, what they're going to be doing. It was like military style, marching in a line and, doing the whole about face and that sort of thing. I mean, and people seem to be getting accustomed to this. Maybe some of these shows help them get accustomed to it. Movies. And
that's one purpose of those shows. Yeah. Entertainment. Huxley, in A Brave New World basically said his thesis was we would be smiling at Big Brother. We wouldn't be running from Big Brother. No, it's taught to people this day. This is the way a policeman should look. Black outfits. And I often say when you see the movie Star Wars, what color does Darth Vader wear? It's the Darth Vader. Black is the color of authority. I work with University of Virginia students who study with me, and I had a group of them, and I said, I would like to know why all of a sudden all the police in this country are wearing black. They no longer wear blue or brown like they used to wear, the friendly colors. These students did a long research project. They brought it to me, and they handed me the paper, and they had some pictures, and I flipped through it. I went, oh, my God. It was Nazi soldiers standing there with ball caps on, just like you see the modern cops today in black outfits. You couldn't hardly tell the difference between a Nazi and the modern American police officer.
Well, didn't one of the big fashion designers designed the German uniforms. I mean, one of the big ones that's still around today. I mean, they were quite stylish in those days, it seems.
Quite stylish, but black is it's the color of authority. It's not the friendly color, no. And again, in supposedly a free country where you're paying the policeman's salary, he's supposed to be working with you. But in this country, when I'm walking along sometimes and I see police, how they walk up to people, it's not a friendly person. No, it's a person who's in authority, and you either consent or they take you away. And again, we've seen a sporadic shooting of unarmed citizens in this country over the last couple of years. That's increased. You used to never see that. It would cause a mass investigation. The other thing police in this country have, and the courts grant, it's called qualified immunity. Policemen shoot unarmed citizens. There's no basically penalty for them. When people do get damages, the American taxpayer pays for that. The cop just keeps working his job. Very few of them are corrected.
Yeah, didn't recently, some cops that were accused of beating a homeless man to death. I mean, and then
that was in California, yes. The other thing I'm seeing, which is really alarming, it's what I call it in my book, A Government of Wolves, it's the invasion of bodily integrity. All the anal rectum searches we're seeing in America. I mean, they've actually caused bleeding on the streets of Milwaukee. They've been sued in Oakland. Angel Perez, 32-year-old delivery driver in Chicago, the police wanted him to be an informant. He didn't want to do it. They grabbed him, took him to the police station, chained him to a jail cell wall, and said, "We're going to show you what it would like to be in prison." They actually sodomized him with a pistol. He sued them now for damages. But we're seeing a lot of that. The case of Ashley Dobbs, which I detail in my book, her and her niece about a year and a half ago were driving through Texas in the middle of nowhere, and a policeman said he saw them throw out a cigarette out of the car. He pulled them over. He asked them if they had marijuana. They said no. He actually pulled them out, called a backup cop, and they did vaginal and rectum searches without changing the glove. They've sued for about $1.5 million, and they're probably going to get it because you can go to YouTube, by the way, and watch that one. It's on YouTube. So we're seeing the increase. For some reason, there's this wanting to touch people's rectums and stuff in this country. It's really invasive.
Well, the thing about
all documented cases, by the way, all documented, footnoted material.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite amazing. If you think about the fact that the national media will very rarely cover some of these cases that, I mean, you think about the Rodney King case, that got worldwide attention back in the early 90s. But then there's things going on now that, aside from, a local newspaper or something in the alternative press, or if you go to YouTube, if you just watch the network news, you wouldn't know about any of this stuff.
No, and that's why I tell people you can't get news from watching any of the networks in this country, the real news, because they're consumed with pizza parties. I mean, when I turned off television 2 years ago, I just stopped watching it. And the amazing thing is it liberates you in a way. That's what I tell people. You're not watching people talking about inane subjects. Like Brad Pitt's pimples or something, which you hear on going on supposedly news shows. You can get news off of good shows like this one we're doing right now, good interviews. You can get it off the internet, underground, what I call underground kind of posts, things like that. But and by the way, like I said, the NSA has for the last 40 years been doing what they're doing, and the media's never reported. It took Edward Snowden to announce to everybody, here's what they're doing. People knew that. Like I said, I wrote on it in the 1980s. It was happening in one of my books. So you're not going to get it. And the question you raised earlier, people say, well, it's not happening in my communities. Well, of course you're not going to know it if you're sitting 160 hours in front of the television set. That blows my mind, by the way.
Well, I'll say this. I had a meeting where I had a large number of young people, and we discussed the issue of Syria, and I wanted to show both sides and everything. And I showed some clips from American, I'm not going to name the networks, but they were American networks interviewing various congressmen and senators. And I immediately, only a few minutes in, I had a student raise their hand, student age, like 19 years old, raise his hand and say, "This is a parody, right? Is this like Saturday Night Live? This isn't real, is it?" And I said, "Yeah, this is off of this particular network." And just people were just like, their mouths were open, like, this is American media. This is what is consumed by people in the evening when they're sitting down and watching the news. And I said, yeah. I mean, this is what the majority of people get their information from. I mean, still though, I mean, they couldn't believe it. They thought they thought I had just, given them a parody.
And, the other issue I think is really important here, and again, it goes back to the kids. In America, the public schools in this country, the state-run schools, I mean, kids are being conditioned to accept all this. They have zero tolerance policies in the schools where we had a case that we just actually settled where a young boy went to the desk to talk to a teacher on his way back. He's 10 years old in Pennsylvania, state of Pennsylvania. He did an imaginary bow and arrow at a friend who had taken his folder and turned it into a gun and went pow pow with his lips silently. He did an imaginary bow and arrow response. He was removed from school and charged with a weapons violation. Those cases are legion in America. What the kids are being taught in the schools is put your head down. You make a simple mistake, you're out.
Well,
but here's the thing. In New York City, and there have been a couple of good decisions recently on these, but doing strip searches, touching people's butts, vaginas on the open streets while 50 people watch, not objecting. There's a reason why the 50 people watching are not objecting. They're being taught to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll find it, as I said, that group of people I was talking to, they were not in the United States. They were watching American TV, at least American news. But the other thing is that there's a lot of schools who say the thing about zero tolerance, where a 6-year-old will be seen holding hands with a girl and gets in trouble for this. It's almost like you're being taught that any kind of human interaction is considered sexual harassment. It gets on your records, and then psychiatrists have to look at you.
One case we were involved in, a 6-year-old kissed a girl on the hand. He was accused of sexual assault by a teacher. Sexual assault. Now, this goes on their records. If it's not cleaned up, it's a permanent record. A kid with an imaginary bow and arrow just kidding around, that's a weapons violation. In that case that we defended him, we got it removed from his record. Again, if they want to become a judge someday in their life, a weapons violation will pop up. It'll be very, very difficult for them to operate in society.
Or even being a teacher. I mean, there's no way you can get a job as a teacher if you have a sexual assault record.
Listen, we had, to show you how bad it's gotten, we had a 4th grade kid who threatened to shoot a girl across the room with a spit wad. He didn't do it. He was removed from the classroom. The teacher said because of the fact that he wanted to shoot her with a spit wad across the room meant that he had psychological problems. He needed psychological counseling. He was removed again for a weapons violation. That night, his parents were sleeping in their home. They heard a knock on the door. The father went downstairs, opened the door, and there stood 2 policemen. He asked them, "What's up?" And one of the cops looked at him and said, "We're here to investigate the shooting incident." Kids are getting arrested for these things, by the way, and taken away in handcuffs. You're talking about 10-year-old kids and younger.
Yeah, I mean, again, you got to reiterate, we're not talking about China. We're not talking about Russia. I mean, those countries don't have this kind of thing, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, America, by the way, is going to be in my opinion, right now it's emerging as going to be the leading police state in the world. It's going to be very efficient. If you step out of line, you got to be really careful. What you say in your home, you have to be careful. Even talking in your own home, like I said, your cell phone is now a microphone. Your laptop is also a camera. The FBI admits all this. They can do that. So there really is, even if you have your TV set on, by the way, Google admits they can actually hear what you're saying in your room around the house. Yeah. We're back to George Orwell, 1984.
Well, it goes beyond Orwell. I mean,
oh yeah.
The technology is such that, I mean, at least when Winston was out in the countryside, he wasn't being monitored. And now if you take your cell phone with you, or if you have a drone, I mean, my gosh, I mean, think about some poor couple that's, you know, they've decided, oh, well, let's, you know, we're alone here. Let's get amorous and, you know, out in a meadow in the middle of nowhere. And there's a drone up there recording their romance.
Well, you know, they just revealed, you know, a number of the products you're buying in this country, some coming out of China, have chips in them. Your toasters, refrigerators, microwaves, they can be tracked. I have people who say, well, I'm going to get off the grid. I'm going to go out to the country. And like you said, I said, well, as long as you have a toaster, you use any electricity, you're going to be tracked. Number two, Ed, then the big thing is, like you said, the drones are going to be awesome. If they can see through the walls of your home, hack into your Wi-Fi, you can't get off the grid now. And you're absolutely correct. George Orwell could not have foreseen where we're at now. And I think technology, by the way, is trying to evolve humans with technology. Technology is the future. It is not humanity, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that
robotic. Google's buying all the robotics companies. They know where it's headed.
Yeah. And then if you combine that with the revolutions that are taking place in genetics, I mean, if you think about that. I mean, just think about that. If your DNA is on record, which I'm sure that there's some provision somewhere in the new Obamacare thing that they're going to keep genetic information, of course, just to help you, you know, in case, you know, they want to give you a certain medicine. And if you look at the psychometric profile they can get off of all the websites you go to, all the statements you make, all the pictures you've sent, all this kind of stuff, combine that with your DNA, you pretty much have a good idea of exactly what this person is all about. I mean, you, in kind of a weird sense, could create this person.
Yeah, the FBI is amassing a huge DNA database, and it isn't to prove people innocent. It doesn't make any sense. The Supreme Court in this country has actually upheld you can now forcibly take DNA samples from people when they're arrested. They've been doing it a number of traffic stops in this country. They've actually forcibly removed blood in some states, and that will track your DNA. What I'm told by people who work in the field, that DNA can actually go back many generations and determine who your ancestors were. For example, in this country, one big radical was Thomas Paine. If you're some way related to Thomas Paine, and they feel that rebelliousness might exhibit itself in the future, I think they're going to try to modify that. So they can actually look back into your past and find out who you're related to, and they're going to try to mold that. You know, again, the sci-fi movies have all predicted that. So, and the ones I mentioned in the book, people should go see. Minority Report. One movie I tell people they better see is They Live, John Carpenter's great movie.
Yeah, and I was mentioning another one. I don't know if you ever seen the movie with Christian Bale, and I always forget the name of it. Equilibrium.
Equilibrium. I've not seen Equilibrium.
You should see that one. It came out in 2002. It looked like, you know, a combination of Matrix and 1984, but it ceases to really be a movie anymore. It seems more like a docudrama, because the premise, you know, the cops walking around in black for any public event, blimps monitoring people from the sky, people being given this prescription drug to make them peaceful so society will not implode on itself. I mean,
they're already doing that. They're already doing the drug thing in this country. You know, a large cross-section of children in America are on Ritalin.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, and
I have teachers tell me that once kids are on Ritalin, they just become like zombies. They no longer are energetic or creative.
Yeah, I'll say this. I was listening to a TED Talk in which they had an entrepreneur, and he was actually bringing this up, and he was saying, you know, there's two conditions that seem to be associated with being successful in business. And one is to have ADHD, at least what they call ADHD, and the other one is to be bipolar. And he seemed worried that if you start drugging kids for like this ADHD, quote unquote, you're going to get rid of that spark, that energy that is really necessary for creativity and innovation in people.
The great minds of history all had ADHD.
Yeah, of course.
They couldn't sit still. I've studied George Orwell very carefully. His name was really Eric Blair. That was his pen name. He was such an ADHD person. He was amazing. He couldn't sit still. Your great minds of history on the way down, almost all ADHD. Yeah, they're doing away with that now. Again, I think what we see the government has there in terms of technology, we see the tip of the iceberg. I think they're trying to evolve people with the machines now. I think that's the future.
Oh, I absolutely agree with that. And if you ask young people today, would they actually have an implant so they could connect to the internet directly with their brain? Which some people will be like, oh, that can't be done. Whereas
it can be done.
Stuff, I mean, you usually get about at least a third will raise their hand and say that they would do it.
That is probably sometime after 2020 they can begin doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would surprise. I think people would be surprised if they ask young people today these kinds of questions. I mean, transhumanism was considered this real fringe science back around 1999, and now it's totally mainstream.
Oh yeah, I think there's no doubt. I think the danger of that, of course, with people like me who want to remain free, is that with a chip or whatever, the computer systems, whatever you want to call it. In fact, I've had computer scientists, they call it the dark arts. One said it around me, and I said, what do you mean by the dark arts? They said, we just don't really understand sometimes what's going on out there. The machines, if we want to call it that, they're not really machines, will be dictating exactly what we do. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's really troublesome if you realize that if you're being monitored now, just think if they're actually in your heads. You know, we have about 1 minute left. I want you to tell how people can get more information about your book, your website, and basically to start, if they haven't already, to start looking into these issues and become informed.
Yeah, my book is called A Government of Wolves, The Emerging American Police State, Amazon.com. You can grab it there. You should read it because I try to propose some solutions, but it's going to take really active citizenry. We have a website at Rutherford.org. That's Rutherford.org. I write weekly on these issues. We post about our cases. Education precedes action. If you're not educated on these issues, folks, you're going to become the sheep. You're going to beget the government of wolves. We've already done it in this country. So, like I say, Americans are transfixed with television now and computer screens, and that's running the show. See the movie V for Vendetta.
Yeah, good movie.
It's a really good movie. I covered that in my book. You can be aware, but you're going to have to step back, go out and grow a vegetable garden, turn the television set off, listen to shows like this, great interviews like this, and read different websites on the internet, get educated. Otherwise, there really is no hope for the future. And I don't want to sound dismal, but it's up to you, the listener out there, to change things. As Gandhi said, you need to be the change.
Oh,
if you want to see change, you can be.
Absolutely. And with that, I'm going to have to say again, thank you, Mr. Whitehead, for sharing all these excellent thoughts with us. And I really encourage people out there to check the website out, as well as to check out the book, Government of Wolves, and become more informed. And this concludes this broadcast of Unlock the Door Radio. Hope you're back next week. Take care.
For more news, visit youtube.com/pigmine5.
This is Ozzy Skateboard.